Now, a 30-year-old man appeared before the Benoni Magistrate's Court East of Johannesburg yesterday for the alleged murder of a 4-year-old girl. Bokgabo Poo from Wattville in Ekurhuleni was reported missing last Monday following a joint search by members of the community and the police. A leg of a child was discovered in a shallow grave inside the yard of the house in Tamboville. Later in the afternoon, a mutilated body was discovered a few meters away from the same house. Now, according to the latest crime stats, 243 children were murdered, a 46.4% increase compared to the same period last year. Now, let's discuss this further. We are now joined via Zoom by Not In My Name Secretary General Themba Masango. Themba, thank you so much for joining us. Not a good time, of course. Our conversation never brings some good news. 243 children and 855 women murdered in South Africa between April and June of 2022. I mean, this latest murder of Bokgabo and the rape of a 2-year-old child in Limpopo have left many South Africans in shock, and it feels like we are collectively and always in a state of perpetual shock.
Good afternoon, and indeed, and it's not a good afternoon at all. And as you've said, the stats have continued to rise. Gender-based violence and femicide continue to be a growing pandemic in South Africa. And, over the last year, you are completely 100% right that women and children are being the most affected. And, from March to June, it was growing at 8.9%. And right now, as you said in your stats, over 43% of murders and so on, and mostly it's becoming women and children. And, it is a shame to bear that title of being the rape capital of the world. And, our femicide rate in the country is 5.1 times higher than anywhere in the world. And that goes to show that there is a lack of consciousness, especially amongst men, when it comes to issues of violence, especially meted out against women and children. And, Nati, I believe that the only way to solve this is to really have venomous sentences towards these perpetrators, and they need to be as harsh as possible and as quickly as possible. Because even, when somebody gets arrested and they are in court, the longer it takes, the family suffers, secondhand trauma because they have to see this person in court. As you saw the other day, the dad who just, decided to lunge onto the perpetrator. And we want to make sure that these cases are dealt with quickly and as venomously as possible. That's why we are calling on a special unit that deals with gender-based violence and femicide, especially if it's meted out on children. Those cases need to be handled quickly, venomously, and those people should never see the light of day.
I'm going to come to the justice system because I would imagine that plays a very key role, particularly in terms of what you are saying in terms of the cases that are in court. But just to go back to how we as community members in the areas in which we live in, we hear of these stories on a daily basis. Are we not shocked enough? Are we not outraged enough? What should we be doing more to make sure that children, as young as 2 years old, being raped, are not harmed?
Definitely. And I think as communities, as South Africa, we are almost at a point where we just have compassion fatigue. It's almost at a point where it's no longer shocking. It's almost at a point where, it's almost not surprising anymore to hear these horrendous, heinous crimes that are happening. In fact, you get surprised if you don't switch on the telly or read a paper and there isn't such a heinous crime that has been committed by a South African man. So really, as communities, I know the community that I come from right now, in Mamelodi, the guys have even started a night watch because they feel that police aren't doing their job adequately. From 10 p.m. up to 5 a.m., the gentlemen are out in the street physically patrolling and, searching and watching anybody that passes by. And perhaps that's what communities should go back doing, because, but also, another thing is that a perpetrator doesn't have perpetrator written on their head. A perpetrator can be an uncle next door, can be a friend, can be, in some cases, even a father or a stepfather. So it is really, as the Chinese say, interesting times that we're living in.
And another thing that you raise, of course, is, just that lack of trust that the public has in not only the justice system, but also in law enforcement authorities. I mean, we know now that hijackings are also on the increase. Children are being hijacked, young women and of course, business people. And the first thing that you will see, in fact, is families, desperate families, crying out on social media, as an example. I mean, just today, the NPA apologizing for having blundered in one of the cases that involves the 6 sex workers that were found in that they did not do what they were meant to do in as far as the identity parade was concerned. So it feels like, the anxiety is exacerbated from the community side by justice system, by the law enforcement authorities, where they should be doing their job. Do you think there's no will in as far as that is concerned?
Definitely. Society's anxiousness is really, really exacerbated by the incompetence of our police and many times of the justice system. And it all boils down to leadership. It all boils down to clear decisiveness when it comes to policing in this country. We cannot have a situation where police themselves do not know how to handle, for example, a case of rape when it comes to the front desk. And those things go to basic training. We cannot have a situation where prosecutors are unclear on making decisions about cases where it is clear that this person has done this crime, and sometimes even to a point where the person has actually pleaded guilty. And we need to, honestly, when it comes to such crimes, I know we've got a progressive constitution and all, but when it comes to such crimes, we need to move away from being perpetrator-centric and really look at the victim and the community that is suffering the shock and the pain that they are facing. And, it starts off at issues of granting bail to perpetrators where, like in here in Mamelodi, where some guy slit a child's throat who is 8 years old just because he had a fight with the mother. And, still having the audacity to go and try and apply for bail, and the court wasting time to even go and listen to such things. We can't do that. And we need to be clear in terms of our leadership. And that goes to the highest echelons of leadership. It starts with the Minister of Policing, for them to have a clear political and public will to say that we're going to clamp down on these such cases, and we're going to make sure that perpetrators feel the wrath of the law. Because it's really on the ground, it's getting to a point where people are starting to say, since police don't want to do anything about it, we are going to do something about it. And you don't want to get to that point. So we really need to make sure that when it comes to the leadership of our law enforcement agencies, they are decisive, they are clear, and they instill a sense of confidence in people. Because we can't have a situation where people are reaching out to Not In My Name via DMs every single day to come and solve and fight issues of such nature in their communities when you've got police. And, it's so bad that when you even confront police at certain police stations and say, this is a case, here's a case number, the investigating officer hasn't even spoken to the victim's family or the victim in the last 3 months. We're hearing that the perpetrator has gone to court and is actually received bail, or the perpetrator, the case has been shut down because the victim never came to court. But this is all the investigating officer's duty, to make sure that they keep in touch with victims, that they make sure that they keep victims updated. But it is just they do whatever they want, and anytime is lunchtime. You get into a police station at 10 a.m. investigation officer, they tell you he's on lunch. What nonsense is that? We can't have such situations going on. We need to have clear leadership, commanders and commissioners of the police need to take this seriously, because this country is dying. Daily we're losing our brothers and sisters. We can't afford to have this. And we don't want to have a situation where people take the laws in their hands and get angry and decide now to deal with perpetrators their own selves. We don't want that situation. So please, I'm really urging the powers that be to do the right thing. And for God's sake, men, stop killing women, man. Yes.
Themba, thank you so much for your time. Of course, a very difficult but necessary conversation that we need to have. Themba Masango there is not in my name, Secretary General. Of course, this conversation comes as many more South African children are killed and raped on a daily basis.